Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I am Dr. Ahmed. I will give you lectures in parasitology, and today is my first lecture. I will give you Giardia lamblia. Other names for Giardia lamblia: Giardia duodenalis and Giardia intestinalis. Objectives. The main objectives of the lecture are: we should know the biology of Giardia parasite, epidemiology and transmission of infection by Giardia lamblia, pathogenesis and the clinical picture of Giardiasis, diagnosis and treatment of infection by Giardia lamblia, control of infection. Giardia was discovered at first by Leeuwenhoek in his own diarrheal stool, and then described by Willem Dosan Lambel in 1859 and Alfred Giard in 1895. It is an intestinal flagellate. It lives in the lumen of the human small intestine. The infective stage is the mature cyst, and the effective dose is about 10 mature cysts. Forms of Giardia lamblia: it has two forms, cyst and trophozoite. The cyst is an oval structure, measures about 8 to 12 by 7 to 10 micrometer in dimensions. It's surrounded by a double wall, smooth wall, and this cyst has a nucleus that starts in division, and when the cyst becomes mature, it has 4 nuclei. The mature cyst, so it has 4 nuclei. When you see a cyst with 4 nuclei, it's a mature cyst. When the host is infected by the mature cyst, the trophozoites will appear in the duodenum within minutes. Here, a process called excistation, which means the liberation of cysts from of trophozoites from the cysts occur. So excistation is the liberation of trophozoites from the cyst. It occurs when pH becomes 1.3 to 2.7. So when the cyst faces this pH, the trophozoites will be released from the cyst. How the trophozoite is? This trophozoite has a characteristic shape, so it's a teardrop shaped or thin-structured. It's like a face. It measures about 9 to 21 by 5 to 15 micrometers in dimensions. It has a convex dorsal surface and a flat ventral surface that contains the ventral disc. So the ventral disc helps the Giardia to attach to the wall of the small intestine. The trophozoites has a long exostele, 4 pairs of flagella directed posteriorly and aid the parasites in moving. So it's a motile parasite. The trophozoite is motile. Trophozoite has 2 symmetric nuclei with prominent karyosomes. It produces the shape of face. It has a characteristic face-like image that appears on stained preparations. This is a stained slide. It's a fixed smear Here we see the nuclei and the characteristic shape of the trophozoid. Here this is a clear trophozoid, face shape, two nuclei, and exostele and flagella. Life cycle. The mature cyst is the infective stage. It's found on surfaces, in soil, food, and water that have been contaminated with feces from infected individuals. Trophozoites can also be found in feces, but the problem with trophozoites is that it's a fragile. It can't withstand the environment. So it's fragile. The Giardia cyst is hard. It's protected by an outer shell that allows it to survive outside the body for a long time. It makes it tolerant to chlorine, this infection. The cysts are hard and they can survive for several months in cold water. Life cycle starts, as we said, when we ingest or when subject ingests the cysts. These cysts are infectious directly when they are passed in the stool. So directly these cysts are mature and they are infectious, and therefore the cyst is directly infectious, and there is a risk of direct transmission of infection between persons. So the patient can directly transmit the infection to others because the cyst is infectious upon release from a human with feces. So it is infectious directly. So a direct transmission is possible between people. The excitation, the release of trophozoites, occurs in the duodenum, and these trophozoites, when released, they multiply by binary fission and they remain in the lumen of the proximal small bowel, and then they can be free or attached to the mucosa by their ventral sucking disc. The incestation occurs at the end part of the colon. When the trophozoites released from the cyst, they pass down to the colon, and in the colon these trophozoites will be changed to cyst. This is called incestation, and they will be released outside. So the trophozoites will be released outside as trophozoites, and also will be released outside as a cyst, because these trophozoites, many of these trophozoites change to cyst in the colon. So we will repeat: the cyst, when it is ingested by a person, it will be changed to trophozoite in the duodenum, and this is called excitation, the release of trophozoites from the cyst. And then trophozoites multiply in the duodenum and they cause the disease. They are the pathogenic forms. At the end, in the colon, these trophozoites will be changed into cyst by a process called incestation. And if the stool is formed or semi-formed, it will have cysts because the trophozoites will have enough time to change to cyst. While when there is a diarrheal stool, when there is a diarrhea, acute infection, a frequent bowel motion, this time is low, and the cyst will be the trophozoites can be released directly outside the body. Okay, but the trophozoites, when they are released, they are fragile and they are disintegrated. So we can find trophozoite in the stool, but it is very rare, even in diarrheal stool. Okay, but we can find the cyst, and the cyst is the main diagnostic form. Trophozoite is also a diagnostic form, but the cyst is the main diagnostic form in the aerial stool and in the formed and semi-formed stool. In formed and semi-formed stool, we can't see a trophozoite, never, because all the trophozoites will be changed to cysts by the incestation process. There will be enough time for the trophozoites to go into incestation and change to cyst. While in the aerial stool, we know that the stool pass frequently, so there will be a little time for trophozoite to change to cyst. So cyst will be released because some trophozoites will be changed to cyst, but the others pass as trophozoites, and these trophozoites are fragile and they disintegrate easily. And even so, we can find trophozoites, but the main point that help us in the diagnosis of infection, the main form is the cyst, because it is hard and resist the environment. It's a worldwide parasitic infection, prevalent in warm climates. Children, they have more risk to get the infection. There are animal reservoirs, mainly the beavers act as reservoirs for this parasite. They are reservoirs for this parasite. We can get infection from fomites, from belongings, from furniture, from water resources, from food that's contaminated with feces, fecal materials that contains the cyst. People who go to swimming pools, they can drink water which is contaminated with the cyst from infected people, and they can get the infection. Traveling to endemic areas is a high risk to get infection with Giardia. Giardia causes diarrhea and intestinal malabsorption, so it can cause malabsorption and diarrhea. Giardia has many mechanisms that can induce the disease. It can cause damage to epithelial brush border, can release enterotoxins. There are immunological reactions against this parasite, and against the materials that released by these parasites can increase and worsen the condition. They can alter gut motility, and they can induce fluid hypersecretion by many materials and many substances that released inside the lumen of the intestine. There is loss of saccharidase enzymes, and these parasites have a variant specific surface proteins. These proteins help the Giardia to evade the immune response. So these parasites can induce a damage to the wall of the intestine, and they can invade the immune response. So there are risk factors for infection. Children, they have high risk to get infection. Male homosexuals, and homosexuality is a risk factor for transmission of the disease. We can say that Giardia lamblia is a homosexually transmitted. Okay, so it's a sexually transmitted disease, can be regarded as sexually transmitted disease. Mentally ill persons, they have high risk to get the infection. Blood group A, those with aclohydria, low pH, low stomach pH, also they can get the infection. Use of cannabis, chronic pancreatitis, malnutrition, immune defects such as IgA immune deficiency, cystic fibrosis, All these can be at risk of getting the infection, and those who live in crowded areas. Clinical picture. We have acute form of disease, we have a chronic form of disease, and we have the disease that affects children. Acute form of disease. The incubation period of Giardia is 1 to 14 days. The disease lasts 1 to 3 weeks. In acute form of disease, there is acute diarrhea, there are gases, greasy stools, which that tend to float. There is abdominal cramp, abdominal pain, GIT upset, nausea, vomiting, dehydration. These symptoms might seem to resolve, but sometimes return back. Chronic form of disease can resemble irritable bowel syndrome. Sometimes it can cause biliary colic. And in children, Giardia cause malabsorption, malnutrition, growth retardation. We will continue in the next part of our lecture with diagnosis of Giardia lamblia. Thank you very much.